Today, we become legends.
This time on Titan Talk, they went over the balance notes and a few additional things for OB19 that weren't shown in the patch preview, as well as some interesting questions about god popularity, bringing back 2 relics, and a Smite subscription service. So without further ado, let's jump in. So first up, balance notes for OB19. I won't be covering any of the new additions like Curios or the new Rip Talent item in this video, as I've covered them already last time. You can check out that video if you want, but one correction from last time. I said the Bifrost Shard's cooldown was 120 seconds in that showcase video. It's actually 90 seconds, and we now have details on what the Arena Curio will be. This is Battle Cry, which builds up stacks on God, Kill, or Death up to 5, and on use you consume all stacks and gain 3% stats from items and 3% movement speed per stack used for a max of 15%. But moving on to the balance changes for OB19. First up, Sanguine Lash's active damage has been nerfed from 10% max health to 7.5%. That's a total nerf from 30% down to 22.5 if you have 3 charges. Moving on to gods though, Anhur is getting a buff to his ultimate's base damage both for the regular spears and the final bigger spear. This is pretty substantial as there's 5 smaller spears plus the big one, so at rank 5 this is a 200 base damage increase if you hit all the spears. Fenrir is getting some changes to his aspect. On the 1, the stun duration is now 1 second versus 0.75 in the regular form, and the protection damage scaling is going up from 30% to 45. Also, his 2 strength is going up substantially in the early ranks of the ability, but the same at max rank, and the healing that Fenrir gains from allies lifesteal is going up from 25% to 30%, so some pretty substantial buffs for aspect Fenrir here. Next up, we have Hecate, who's getting some buffs, with her 1's base damage going up by 10 at all ranks, which is nice, but the bigger change here is her ultimate now being 90 seconds at all ranks instead of 110 scaling down to 90. This will make her a much bigger threat in the early game as this ult can swing fights pretty heavily. Mulan is actually getting some nerfs after the big round of buffs she got last patch. The training ground's movement speed is being nerfed from 10% to 5%, and the arrow base damage from her ultimate is being nerfed from 180 up to 540. It's now 180 up to 500. Jormungandr is getting a suite of base stat buffs as he generally had lower base stats than other tanks in the game, and that was contributing to him getting blown up very quickly, obviously alongside his passive damage increase and long channel times. Nemesis is finally getting some base and aspect nerfs, with her 2's base damage going down by 15 at all ranks, her 3's cooldown going up to 14 seconds flat instead of 14 scaling down to 12, and her aspect ultimate now moves hers and her target's HP 75% of the way to the average instead of all the way. Tsukuyomi is getting some very small nerfs to his 2, taking off 5 base damage at all ranks from the swings and the final hit for a total of 15 base damage across the whole ability. Aspect Wukong is getting a nerf to his 3, the cooldown is now 14 seconds compared to 12 before. This will certainly help with having him a little more time to punish him if he uses the bird, but I think the cooldown reduction in general probably needs to be looked at here. And finally we have a Yamoja aspect buff with her 1's bubble scaling going up from 30% to 50, the small bubble scaling going up from 15 to 25, and her ultimate scaling going up from 70 to 85. But that's it for OB19 balance. Let's move into the Q&A section of the show. First up, someone asked how Ares is doing in terms of bans, and Pon said he's definitely up there, but some of that might be due to displacement immunity bugs that they've been working on fixing, so they probably want to fix all that stuff and see where he's at before nerfing him. Someone asked where the Sun Wukong Street King skin is as it's cross-gen, and Kilgun said he thinks that one's going to be an OB20, and then Hell's Fury Mercury will be OB21. They're really pushing to get the final few cross-gen skins out now, as there's been one in basically every update for the last few patches. Kilgun said those will be the final cross-gen skins to port, except for King Arthur's one, which of course they can't do until he's in the game. Someone asked when we'll see the next 2 gods after Osiris, and Kilgun said they usually do it on the Monday before they reveal the last god from the previous batch, so that will be Monday the 29th when we get to see who the next 2 gods will be. There was a question on aspects and if they have any kind of big aspect pass planned or not, and Pon said right now they're trying to find a balance between making sure new ports have an aspect on launch, which is their top priority, and also going back to older gods that don't have aspects or have ones that they want to take another look at, such as Loki or Sobek. They think some underused aspects can be tuned up on numbers and work pretty well, such as Fenrir and Yamoja, but some they have tried that and people still aren't really vibing with them, such as Sobek, so for those ones they do eventually want to go back and do another pass on them. Someone asked who the most popular gods are right now, and Kilgun said the data he had readily available at the time was from September 9th, and at that time Janus was the most popular god because it was pretty close to his release, and he's probably fallen off since then, which which I don't know if his data is right, to be honest. September 9th was Tsukuyomi's release, and before that was Jormungandr. Janos' release was August 12th, so it seems like he is holding up pretty well if after a month of his release, he's still the most popular character. Kilgun said that Neith was second, no surprise there. Poseidon was third, Chak was fourth, and Huyi was fifth, who was also a relatively recent release as he came out just before Janos, but still holding up very well. Someone followed up by asking about the least popular gods, and Kilgun said that the least popular god at the time of this data was the Morrigan, followed by Jingwei, then Aladdin, then Amaterasu, and then a Relics. Kilgun did also state that generally a god's visual design is the best indicator of how popular they will be. Their gameplay and balance point matters a bit, but it's far more correlated to if people think the god looks cool, which I guess makes sense. Us hardcore veterans care way more about gameplay compared to the average Smite player, and the first thing they'll look at when picking a god is do they look cool, and then once they're invested in that god, they'll continue to play them as they feel comfortable. Someone asked if they've considered giving every god an anti-heal ability, and Pon said that generally they would rather just tune down healing numbers to do something like that, which I think makes sense. If you give every god an anti-heal ability, you may as well just not do that and reduce healing by 25%, right? It's better if certain gods have that unique counterplay rather than literally every god having it. Pon said there are still some cases they're looking at where healing is a bit absurd, like Ra2 with Shield of the Phoenix, for example, but in general, they're fairly happy with healing on the whole at the moment. On a related note, there was a question in chat about Aphrodite and how after the healing changes, she doesn't really feel like a healer anymore and her healing is pretty weak. And Pon said right now they probably don't want to just increase her healing numbers because she's already pretty strong and has access to a lot of stuff in her kit, like her ultimate, solid damage from the double birds, a bunch of ally buffs, etc. So probably what they would look at doing is giving her an aspect that can separate out some of those elements of her kit and make her stronger in some areas and weaker in some areas to give her base kit and her aspect different identities rather than just having everything. Someone asked how the feedback has been in regards to the new match lobby that was on PTS, and Kilgun said it's been generally pretty positive and most of the criticism they've seen are from things they already knew needed to be worked on, which is why they delayed it until OB20. There was a question about Curios and if they could make it like Smite 1 Shards where it becomes a second relic slot at level 12, and Pon said that generally they don't want to bring back 2 relics for a few reasons. First, they want active items to fill that gap as they think it's a more interesting and flexible system, so you could have Beads and Jade Scepter instead of Beads and Aegis, or have Blink and Pharaoh's Curse instead of Blink and Horrific Emblem. The other main reason is that 2 relics lead to a situation where you would very often have at least one of Beads or Aegis available on backliners pretty much always, which led to very slow games where no one really wanted to engage because there would almost always be a super powerful no button available on both sides of the fight. Someone asked if they have ever considered adding a subscription service to Smite where you pay a monthly subscription and get a steady stream of diamonds and or other content, and Kilgun said he has been pitching this for a long time internally at the studio with various iterations, such as amping up your daily login rewards massively, or a more expensive subscription where you pay a high price but literally everything in the game is unlocked while you're subscribed. I guess we have had some kind of similar things in the past. The current account boosters in Smite 2 are almost a bit like a mini subscription. You buy a month's worth of extra worshippers, XP, and market coins. Also, the season passes from Smite 1 where you buy it at the start of the year and get various pieces of content as the year goes on is a little bit like a subscription service. But finally, there was a question about the Smite Auto Chess game that appeared on Steam this week, and Kilgun said that is an officially licensed game from their sister studio, Prophecy Games, that is still under the Hi-Rez umbrella. It's a long ways out from release, but it's meant to be a sort of spiritual successor to Prophecy, which was the short-lived Smite Auto Chess game from way back when they were all the rage. They are changing the design a little bit, so it's not traditional auto chess in that sense, but it is more of like an asynchronous multiplayer roguelike, similar to games like Bazaar, where you build up your own strength and then fight like a copy of other people's builds. Sounds interesting for sure. But that's everything discussed on the show. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to catch my future recaps, and I will catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.